Okay, let's go ahead and get started. As I mentioned just a little bit earlier, we are recording this morning. Let me do the housekeeping notes to start with. We have a 90-minute session this morning. And you please at any time throughout the presentation, use the Q&A function that's down there. Just be aware that it is not anonymous. If you see your questions already been submitted, you can click on that little upvote thing and that will move it up in the order of things. So this morning's session is about service learning. I've been really looking forward to this morning's session. As I had mentioned in my invitation to everybody, you know that I'm not an academic, I'm a parent myself. And I know that the act of participating in service learning sometimes, either for myself or for my sons, can sometimes feel like it's more of a box checking exercise than something that's coming from the heart. And I would like for service learning to really become something that is in the heart of my children and me, because I'm going to keep learning. And while I know that there are already a lot of wonderfully engaging opportunities for community service at ASIJ, our new program next year, it's very exciting, is going to happen by design for all students and regardless of the amount of time that they spend at our school. So to discuss this topic today, I'm joined by several of my colleagues and colleague to be, Claire, and Cathy Berger Kaye. So Cathy, I am reading a little bit of this here because your background is so important. I wanted to try to cover a lot of it. But Cathy is globally renowned by progressive schools and educators for her work. And I would also say her passion for service learning, 21st century competencies, climate and culture, youth engagement, effective teacher strategies, and environmental sustainability. I actually first met Cathy when I was working at the International School of Prague, and I would say that it is there where I first realized how imperative it is and actually how possible it is to evolve service from a box checking exercise to a life skill. Cathy is also an author. She's the author of The Complete Guide to Service Learning, which we have here, multiple copies at the school for people who would like to check it out of the library. And her work stretches from the LA Unified School District, which is implementing her program with 45,000 rising middle and high school students, over to North Carolina, which has an innovative after-school program for 3,500 primary students in 55 schools, to a middle school scaffolded program integrating STEM studies to the Cherokee Nation and also in Singapore. In addition to Cathy, I'm joined by my colleague Scott Wilcox as our Deputy Head of School for Learning, Ryosuke Suzuki doing his best impression of Steve Jobs this morning as Director of Strategic Partnerships, Jim Harden is a head of school, of course, and Jim, why don't I let you introduce our colleague to be, Claire.
Hey, thank you very much, Clive. And good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us if you're joining us live. Also, thank you for all the folks I know who will watch this video after the fact. So thank you very much. I know all of you can be together with us at 9 o'clock on a Thursday morning. Yeah, it's my privilege to introduce Claire Psillides to our community. And Claire is not with us now in Tokyo. She's still in Singapore. But I thought I would just share a little bit of background of how we found Claire and how she came to join us. So what I would share is, this seems like a eternity ago. Cathy joined ASIJ and visited ASIJ in the fall of 2019, which now honestly seems like so long ago I can hardly remember. And Claire worked with our faculty and it was genuinely inspirational, and we were so excited about getting the work started even back then. But then, as you know, in January 2020 along came the pandemic. And a lot of things have changed over the last 2 years. And in some ways, it kind of delayed our launch of service learning and our thinking about this as a priority, because we spent most of the last 2 years worried about things like roadmaps for reopening and all of the other COVID-related details. So earlier this year, we made the commitment that we really wanted to develop a service learning program. And we look back to Cathy for the inspiration she had given us in 2019. So as we were developing our job description, as we were developing our vision for the role, I reached out to Cathy, in fact, and I said, Cathy, thank you so much for really being the inspiration for what we're doing. And by the way, do you know any cool people who might really be great possible candidates for this Director of Service Learning role? And Cathy didn't say the name, but she said, yes, there's somebody I know who I think might really be perfect for the role. So just let me see what I can do here. And then lo and behold, Claire entered our life, I think about a week or two later or something like that. And it turns out that Claire and Cathy have known each other for quite a few years and worked together. So Claire, I cannot tell our community how excited I am really to have Claire join in our community next year. For those of you who are not as familiar with international schools outside of Japan, what I would share is that Claire currently works at the United World College, Southeast Asia. And Claire and her husband, George, they've actually been around some of the top schools in Asia in the Air Coast region in the course of their careers. But I'm particularly excited about what Claire's been doing for basically the last decade, I think it is. Claire, you guys have been in Singapore for about 10 years now. Because UWC really is, in my mind, very much the gold standard among international schools for what service learning can be. And that is not just in terms of words on the page or the promise of it, but in practice and a real fidelity to the spirit, a program that really is infused by values, but also a sense of what can we do to really have a transformational impact on our students. So Claire, you will get to know our community and many of the people watching here tonight soon. I'm sorry you're not here now with us, but I think today's presentation and having a chance to listen to Cathy will have a great launch that we'll be able to return to in August and September when we start up a new school year. So with that, I would love to turn it over to Cathy, because Cathy truly has been an inspiration for ASIJ and very much where we hope to move forward with our service learning design and program. And what I would love, Cathy, is just to give you a chance to share some of your work, because I think you've been inspirational, not just for ASIJ, but for many international schools.
Cathy, before you get started, let me just, for the listeners this morning, let them know how the timeline will go this morning. Cathy's going to be presenting to us for anywhere from 25 to 35 minutes. Then we've got Scott and Jim and Ryosuke and perhaps you listeners asking questions, just a little fireside chat, and then we can open it up to any questions that anybody has. So on that note, thanks, Cathy.
Great. Thank you both, Clive and Jim, and all of you for coming today. I do wish it were in person. I had such a wonderful visit at ASIJ that I'm just eager to come back at some point. You know, before COVID, I'd be on the road traveling to many international schools, often over 150 days a year. So it's been quite a different experience to be Zooming in, but I'm glad we have that technology so I can join you today. So today we will be looking about what service learning is. And as stated, I'm based in Los Angeles. No snow here today, no blizzard. We have about 80-degree temperature, so I'm kind of stunned by that. And I really enjoy the way I'm able to do this work, whether it's virtually or in person, to really help people understand what service learning is and where it comes from, and how it's important both to do in our own families, to have an ethos of service in our families, and really make it part of the ethos in service school. So I thought I would just start with the beginning, with my personal beginning. When I was a teacher, my first teaching job was in rural Maine. And I was teaching in a very small schoolhouse. And we had a small group of students. It was not a large school. And I was, if you remember the first day of your career of a new job, whether you were a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer, whatever your profession, that first few months, it's just, the expression in English is you're feeling like a deer caught in headlights. You're not quite sure what to do, but you're just on edge trying to make everything work. And I was in that moment of feeling fairly insecure as a teacher when a situation occurred in the community. Dutch elm disease hit the trees in rural Maine where I was living. Now, I was from the city. I did not know an oak from an elm. I had no idea what this was about. But the students were so upset about this that I thought, wait, what's going on here? And how can I really listen to the students rather than just constantly be forcing my curriculum on them? How can I really bring my curriculum to life through their energy, their enthusiasm, and their curiosity about the situation? So we started learning about Dutch elm disease and the causes. And within 3 days, the students who were old enough had gotten certified by the State Department of Agriculture to go out with college students in the community and really look at trees and really distinguish which were diseased and which could be saved. And the younger children were writing tree poems, and other kids were acting out trees, and trees were the central theme, and all the curriculum was being taught, but it's through a different lens. I thought, this is amazing, because students are alive with curiosity and so much is happening. And I realized that for me was the seed of what teaching and learning could really be about. And I did not know at that time that that would be a thread that would carry me through my professional career to this day today. So you never know where things will lead. So let's look at the words service and learning. When I first was making PowerPoints a long time ago, I drew in these icons for service. There's a heart over the word service, because I do believe the term service connects with what we care about and what really matters to us. And when we do service, we're really touching a part of our emotional self, because we're feeling things. We're feeling what's going on in the world around us. And we're also seeing how what we care about, we can translate not just from caring to actually doing something about it. We're learning that icon, that 5-shaped, is supposed to be a crown. I don't know if you want, Claire, here, you join with this. Here, you can make a crown with your hands, circles. Everybody can. And if you put the crown on, you realize you elevate up. And that when you lift up in learning, you're elevating, and it's also open-minded. So I've always used that as my symbol for learning, that we want learning that really opens us up and really connects us. What I learned later on when I had my daughters, I have 2 daughters who are now adults, but when they were adolescents, and I don't know if you have 2 adolescent daughters in your house, it's quite lively to say the least. I was trying to understand how to really reach my adolescent daughters, and I learned about brain research. And what I learned is that all the way up and through adolescence to age about 25, when we become adults, that we take in information first from our emotions to our intellect. So what I had drawn years before about this heart-mind connection, the heart of service connecting with the mind of learning, was actually accurate. And when we really use service as an entry into learning, we're really actually following how our brain works. And it also shows up in a classroom, because when a student does not care that much about what they're learning or the topic of education that they're supposed to be, excelling at, that the teacher has to work harder. But when students care even a little, then they're willing to work so much harder, and that learning comes so much more to life for them. So this is this incredible link between service and learning. And I wish I could say I thought of it first, but I didn't, because if we look at what Aristotle said quite a few years ago, Aristotle said, educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. So they really do go together. And it's fascinating to me, because we have other words like philanthropy, which we often connect with money and doing things with finances, but actually it means the love of humankind. So we have words in our vocabulary that we really can draw from to really connect with this idea. The other word I just want to mention for a moment is, what is education as distinct from instruction? Instruction actually means to put in, and education means to draw forth. And what ASIJ is really working on is a system of education that draws forth young people so they can participate more fully and completely. So what is it we want to draw forth? Now, with my own daughters, and I'm sure you have with your own children, whether you're approaching the children as a parent or as a teacher, we can think of what are the characteristics or character traits we really want to draw out in our young people. What are the character traits we want them to grow into, so they're not just well-educated or academically educated, they're really good people, and that they're really good neighbors. And this is what we think about with service learning, is all the different traits and aspects of character that we're developing, as well as all these other attributes of knowledge and skills and dispositions. So one of my favorite quotes is by Maya Angelou. I love quotes. It's part of what I always share. And this one is, life is not measured by the number of breaths we take, but by the moments that take our breath away. And for me, service learning is exemplary of that kind of experience. It's memorable, and it's stories we want to keep, and it's attributes we want to really excel in, so that we live up to the best that we can be. And so I just wanted to offer that as a gift for how I see this all measuring out. So I wanted to share one of my key concepts that I think is real important as we're entering this construct of service learning, that very often learning is framed as lessons or activities that we do with students. But I've learned that that's really not the best descriptor of what sticks with students, that what really sticks with students in academic situations are the experiences they have. So what we're looking at is, how do we create learning experiences that really assist young people figure out their place, for example, in the world, and what that means. So what does a good learning experience include? It should have challenge. It should be something that challenges them and draws them to really grow and to experience and stretch. It should also have some significance. They know it has some meaning, and it also has something that's real. You know, we used to say learning should be relevant, but now students can be in real time with different devices. They can travel the world from their screen. They want to be involved in something that's real and true and present. And it also needs to be engaging, something that really wakes them up and that gives them a reason to get out of bed and jump into the school day. And I love this word, purposeful. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was in school, especially in high school, I spent much time looking out the window asking, why am I learning this? Does that resonate with anybody on the screen? Anybody? Jim, you nodded a little bit. Is that something you can relate to? So sometimes in my workshops, I'll even dare to ask teachers, how many of you teachers look out the window and wonder, why am I teaching this? That it's not just students that need a sense of purpose, it's also teachers and schools. Schools need a sense of purpose as they move forward. And I think service learning and these ideas of experiences as learning gives us a sense of purpose and reason to show up. And I think most importantly, I love the word adventure. Learning should be an adventure. And I remember one of my daughters, when she was 5 and I was tucking her to bed, she looked up at me with these big brown eyes and said, Mommy, when am I going to have adventures like you? And I was so stunned that even at age 5, young children crave a sense of adventure in their life. So one of my favorite ways to define adventure comes from a book called Identity by an author called Milan Kundera. And he describes adventure as a way to embrace the world. Just imagine that if adventure is a way to embrace the world, and if schools bring adventure to life for students as part of learning. So I checked with the mission statement of ASIJ, and it's right there. You know, fostering the community of inquisitive learners, independent thinkers to be their best self, empowered to make a difference, which requires all of those elements of challenge and something real, and a sense of adventure and a sense of purpose and significance to all come to life in the daily life of a school. And so this is a perfect example of how your school is on this path to really bring these kind of concepts as part of everyday learning to your students. So what exactly is service learning? I'd like to just take you through this quick visual of what it is before I tell you some stories that will give you examples of what service learning really can look like in schools around the world. So I developed this visual years ago to really show that service learning is not a straight line, it's a dynamic. And it starts with investigation. Anytime you want to learn something, you have to investigate that. If you want to learn how to play a guitar, if you want to learn about climate change, you want to learn about the history, we have to investigate that topic. And in so doing, we're examining all kinds of issues. We're learning about what makes, what's going on before, what caused this to happen. So we raise a lot of questions as we investigate, and we look at the issue from both assets and needs, what's going well with that issue, and what's something that is needed. And when students find a need, it's like a phoenix rising to doing action like we all do. We want to see things happen. But we as educators have, and I know Claire knows what I'm talking about, has to say, no, not yet. We have to go to preparation first. And this is very important because this is where curriculum, which is that word right in the center, truly comes to life as students prepare and learn about this issue from many different angles. They learn about the root causes. They learn about the history. They learn how it connects to the culture of where they are right now. They learn so many elements. And as they're learning, they're thinking of all the different ways that they can have impact. always drawing upon their personal interests, skills, and talents. So every student, and I will say that 100% of the students find a way to participate in ways that are meaningful for them. And this is really key, that every student finds their way into the story. And then they're ready to say, we're going to take action, because they've done very good thinking and planning. And there's actually 4 kinds of action. And you'll hear these described in the different stories I tell. One is direct service. And direct service is when students engage personally with people, with the environment, or with animals. I often say they have to see the whites of people's eyes. So they're getting up close and working with them. But you can also do these things virtually, and that can often look like indirect service. So indirect service is very often connected with raising funds or making a product that you give to someone. I love when, or helping an organization, for example, create a better website so that they can amplify their voice to others. Advocacy is a different form of amplification, and it's giving voice to a cause. I like to draw students' attention to the VOC in the middle of the word advocacy, like a voice. So I'll ask students, who needs our voice? And they immediately know it's animals need our voice. People who are underserved in our communities. The planet needs our voice. So we become advocates, we give voice to a cause. Or often we can find research that needs to be done so that others can do their work better. You know, very often research that is done by students is so exceptional at schools like ASIJ that it ends up in a drawer afterwards. But if, for example, the school partnered with an organization that needed a certain kind of research, oh my gosh, there'd be so much being done and so much being served, and students would be so much more engaged in that kind of research. So we really want to look at all these 4 kinds of ways so students have diverse experiences with service learning. Now, again, on the right side, you will see some of the perspective that your school has and what it means to be a global citizen at your school, a global perspective. And I'm going to draw your attention to the final statement, that global citizenship at ASIJ is to solving ambiguous and complex problems in the real world to benefit citizens. So I hope that all I've described with service learning so far shows how it really funnels perfectly into the ambitions and desires of the administrators, the board, the educators at your school to really enliven this for students and give them that capacity to take action, not just when they're adults, but to begin now. So along the way, I just would like to point out, if you're concerned about, will this take away from what my students or my children are already doing or learning at school? I'd like to assure you that service learning actually strengthens knowledge. It strengthens academic inquiry, rigor, and application, because they have this desire to do more. They know that the work they're doing doesn't just go for a grade, it's done because somebody or something depends on them. And that sense of purpose and reason to learn really encourages them to work often harder and to really apply their knowledge and then transfer it and use it in new ways. And I've been in education a long time, and I'm really confident I can tell you that service learning increases skill development for students better than any other teaching strategy I've ever seen. It increases their social analysis of issues and concepts and real high level thinking. And so there's no wonder that I've worked with many universities around the world. And one university, for example, Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, requires all their teachers to include professors, to include service learning in what they're doing, because they know it increases their ability to solve problems and to do high level thinking. So it's not just K-12, there's universities who've embraced this idea. Service learning also increases youth initiative, voice, and choice. So it gives them a way to have a sense of efficacy now and gives them a chance to see that they can really do things that matter in the moment. And they learn how to form partnerships that are based on reciprocity, not on I'm here to make your life better, we're here to work together. So I'm not doing service for you or to you, we're doing it with each other. And everybody grows and elevates in that respect. And affects that mindsets that young people have that places values on others and really recognize the strengths in other people, as well as developing their own as they develop interpersonal and team-related skills. And these are all concepts that I'm confident I've seen in the documents from ASIJ that these are important for the school to develop. It's our world. we want to be part of it and make sure it's better. So I just want to give you one more visual, not to inundate you, but just to share with you, this is something that came out of the United Nations, the Sustainable Development Goals. And this is so many of the issues we care about in our world, labeled and put on these 17 little boxes. The reason I'm showing this to you now is I'm about to go into storytelling about service learning to give you some examples of what it really, really looks like. And when I do, you're going to see these little boxes appear because all the schools that I've been working with around the world use this model to help students know that even if they're not taking service, they can connect their learning to meaningful issues going on in the world. Then when they take actions and they actually do things, they're assisting this global commitment to improve our world that's been spearheaded by the UN and being adopted by business and corporations and governments all around the world and education systems. So this is something that I know your school is looking at and will be part of what you're doing in the future. So let's hear some stories of what service learning looks like. And to start, I'd like to go to Clive's old school, the International School of Prague. Clive, you're going back a little bit to an older story. But I was at the International School of Prague several times, and this is one of the most amazing stories I've ever heard, because often we wonder, where can very young children get involved in service learning? So this school really made it part of the curriculum, and I'd like to just emphasize it again. Service learning doesn't stop the curriculum. It can be the engine that moves the curriculum forward. So in this classroom, they're studying wheat turning into flour into bread, and they're using Post-it notes, which I love, to really map this out. And then of course it would make sense, and this was prior to COVID, that they got to go visit a bakery. And they got to go in the back of the bakery and they got to see how bread was made. And this inspired the students that they, of course, wanted to open a bakery. They wanted to be bakers. So here you can see students doing the baking. They were making all kinds of things. They even made their hats. And if you think about it, what does it entail to bake? All the measuring, all the numbers, all the disciplined work, all the collaboration, all the listening, all the just so much going on. And washing your hands a lot, obviously, a lot of washing your hands. But what was fascinating was they did not eat anything of what they made. Nothing. They froze it, they kept it. But just keep in mind that the smells of all this baking is going all through the school. They're going, what's going on in these 3 kindergarten classes? Instead, the students are creating advertisements. They're going around and advertising that they're about to open bakeries with all of these great goods that they made. So now you get to see the students actually running cash registers, selling. Think of the skills these kids are learning. This just amazes me. All of the learning going on. And oh, by the way, the parents, like you, parents would have been coming in and teaching how to make different kinds of breads and goods. So they're getting cultural lessons, history lessons, they're reading, they're thinking, they're looking at all the different subjects, all while they're baking and running the cash register and all these things that they've done. And then, of course, what do they do with all this money that they made? So they have to determine what they do, and they learned about community needs of hunger. And they partnered with the food bank and found out exactly the foods they needed. And adults said, we'll go to the market and do the shopping for you. And the students said, oh no, we will go to the market and we will do the shopping. And then they sorted the foods and they put it on the trucks and they made sure it was delivered. They also made their own video about what they did, and they wrote a cookbook.
The cinnamon rolls were very good.
I'm sure of that. So I love to share this story because sometimes people say, is there learning involved in service learning? And it's like, oh my gosh, there is so much going on that is exciting and real and true that students are excited about. When students finish one of these experiences, they don't go, oh, I'm so glad that's done. They say, what's next? What do we do next that we really get our hands into and really learn? So I'd like to share this other story from Shanghai, and this is at Concordia International School. The students were studying human migration, and the 4th graders decided to go out and do on-the-street interviews. Of course, they had adults with them and all that. And they were interviewing people who had moved to Shanghai to learn what it takes for people to move to a new community. You can see one student is making a video, one's asking questions. Now you're seeing the interaction here, but please trust that these students really had to learn quite a bit before they got there. They were very shy. This is by the teachers' admissions. They were shy, they weren't confident. They did practice. They built all these public speaking skills to get them to go out and do this. And then they made a video of all these different interviews, which they gave to the Office of Admissions to use with new families at the school so they could learn how to adapt and grow as they moved into the school community. Now, I was actually at the school several times, and one of my visits, I was doing a parent meeting, just like we're doing now, but I was in person. And as I was talking about this particular experience, there happened to be two young boys who came to this talk with their parents. I'm guessing they needed to come because of childcare. And when I started talking about this example, the two boys started to go just chatter to each other right away, like, and I noticed it, and I had this sense, and I looked at them and I said, "Excuse me, but were you part of this class last year?" And they said, "Yes." And I said, "Would you come up and describe your experience?" So what you see in this photograph, these two boys came up. Now, often we have students speak. Am I right, Jim? That students will speak at different events, and we prep them and we get them ready. But here there was no getting ready. These two boys stood up with a microphone in hand in front of a room packed full of parents, and they described their experience with extraordinary ease. And one of the boys said, "Before we did this, I had no confidence in public speaking, but now I feel confident standing up in front of people." And then I said, "Well, could you also tell about the video?" And he seamlessly just passed the microphone to his friend, and the other boy just picked up the mic and continued talking. Well, at that moment, I felt like I could retire. These boys could take over everything. They were doing such a beautiful job, but they really understood what they learned, and we saw the transferable skills from what they were doing. So I'd love to share with you a story from your own school. And I know both Jim or Scott or Clyde could share this story, so I hope you don't mind if I'll just share what happened with the Rice Field Project. And this project started from a service-related initiative to feed onigiri to homeless people in a park nearby. I think it's pronounced I'm going to say it wrong, Ueno, is that correct? Okay. And it evolved into more of the elementary school students partnering with a local farmer to cultivate the school's very own rice field. And they used the rice field as a laboratory to explore questions with the middle school and high school students. And they also learned about the defining role that rice has played in Japanese culture. So I love when service learning really goes deep into the culture of the students. And Clive in the introduction said, I've worked with the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma, and we did a great deal of work where they were preserving their culture as part of the service learning experiences, which was very meaningful because in many cases, we know culture can be unfortunately lost. The grade 8, we're making a difference in the surrounding community. And first they studied local needs. They met with business and officials and attracted, what was going on, people who worked in the area, evaluated how they could be more helpful in the community. And they did a range of experiences I think was ideal because it gives all the students different opportunities to participate. Volunteering in a park, planting gardens, QR codes to help businesses, maps for families. And they learned about the interdependence. And I think this is so important as students really grow to become good neighbors and good partners and people who think well about what community is and what it means. So Clive, do I have time for a few more examples? Are we good? So one of the things I always talk about with schools when I'm there and working with teachers, and I know I did when I was at your school, is we talked about what's the approach we take to learn about others. I'll confess here, in the early days of service learning, I think we took what we would call a deficit model. We would go into communities and say, what's wrong? And then we would come there to fix it. That doesn't really work. And I think it increases this divide between us and them. And I don't think it's a healthy relationship to have. So we've gotten rid of that model and we use what's called an asset-based model, where we look at what's going well with the community, what are their strengths, and then when we come in to see what needs are, we're working more together. And this creates a better harmony and relationship that's mutually respectful. So I'm going to give you an example of this by taking you to Angola. And this is an example of service learning that happened during these times of COVID. So at Luanda International School, some students learned, and this was an upper level class, I believe grade 11, that there were people in a nearby community who could not afford masks, which we know are very important for people's safety. And so they could not really protect themselves as was really required during these times. So they decided to learn about the community. And what they learned is that the women there in particular were very good at sewing. So they could make masks, but what did they lack? They lacked the fabrics and the tools in which to make them. So they partnered with a nearby artisan who made and designed t-shirts that really were about being safe and being well during these times. And the students marketed and sold these t-shirts, not just within their community, but to the larger community in Luanda. And this afforded them the opportunity to purchase the fabric needed to provide it to the women and others in that community so they can make masks and distribute them for free into the community. Other students brought in other skills because for me, service learning really draws on the interest, skills, and talents of many students. And they designed posters, both in English and Portuguese, because those are the languages of Angola, the primary languages used. Of course, there are many native languages, but they created these posters, again, to keep people safe and to really learn how to protect themselves in these times. So just another little bit about stories. I'd like to take you to Barcelona. I love this story because this shows the innovation that students can have for deeper inquiry. This is a community outside of Barcelona where the swallows used to come every year and nest, and it was a big, joyous celebration for the community, and people would come from near and far to see the swallows. I'm sure you've heard of these kind of experiences. So the problem occurred that the swallows suddenly stopped coming. And after they'd stopped coming for 3 years, they brought in experts and anthropologists and all these folks to see how they could fix the situation, bring the swallows back, and nothing worked. So they gave this problem then probably to the most qualified group, and that's fourth graders. They were given the challenge to make swallows return. So the students really embarked on a really deep social analysis of what was going on. And they used this method of action research I developed called the MISO method. That can remind us of a delicious soup, but it's also a method of research. So what is this MISO method? It's a method used around the world, and we're going to see how it's used here now at this school. They used M media. The students read articles, they watched videos, and they read some of the pamphlets that had been created with information from the scientists who come before. They interviewed the town manager, the scientists, and some key residents who were very committed to this topic. But this was most important. They surveyed elders in the community because elders are the keepers of the knowledge, and they knew what had happened before. So they interviewed the elders in the community and found out what they remembered. And then they did some observation to find out what had interrupted the nesting patterns. And they saw and they learned from the elders, especially, that the birds like to nest in little tiny spaces. And all those spaces had been taken away by changes to the habitat and the buildings that had come into their community. The students decided they would build small clay nests for the birds and put them at strategic locations in the space, in the city. And within about a year, all the swallows had come back. They started coming back the next season, and they did bring the swallows back. They figured it out. So they cracked the code and they brought the swallows back. So we can see that these 5 stages are alive in this process. And it really begins with the students and their interest, skills, and talents. And that's something we really start with. I'm going to skip this right now and go into one last story, if that's all right. So I'd like to go back to trees. I started with trees. I'm going to kind of bring this to a close with trees. And this is going to take us to Argentina. We haven't been to every continent yet, so we'll dive into Argentina. And this is in the southern part of Patagonia, a beautiful area where the entire community relies on the natural environment for their industry, the parks where people come. It's really part of their tourism, and this is what keeps the community afloat. In fact, there's an elementary school in this large park, which is the hub of their community. What happened? A fire. It caused the loss of more than 7,000 hectares of native forest and grassland, and it really just devastated the entire community. They did not have the resources or the means to bring back their park, and they were at a loss. until they realized their greatest asset was the children. And they turned to the children to do all the planting and to really build this concept of reforestation. And often I'm asked, how young can children get involved in service and service learning? And I have to say, whenever they can. And these the youngest ones, the preschoolers, I've worked with schools to build preschool service learning opportunities. These youngest ones are there planting and growing and making this part of what they do to contribute to their community and being agents of change. And this concept of students as change makers is at the heart of service learning. And not just that. Again, we want them to be the young people we admire and to be the voices and the faces of the future that will make sure our world goes in the direction that gives us all hope and reason to celebrate. So I'm going to pause there. I have so much more I can share, but I'm mindful of the time and wanting to have a conversation. So I'd like to thank you for this opportunity and stop sharing for the moment so we all come back together.
Thank you so much, Cathy. That's outstanding. The next part of the program, as it were, is a fireside chat with Claire and Jim and Scott and Ryosuke firing away with comments and questions. Can I throw one just to start with at you? You had started, there was one part that you had mentioned where kids of different ages are capable of doing different things, different parts of a project, which then is wonderful because it necessitates kids then working together. We're actually seeing that here. You mentioned the rice program here. I know that the elementary school is now working with kids in the high school to design packaging for the rice that they grow and figuring out how they can sell it. And when we were discussing this a few days ago, I had mentioned the idea that service tends to lend itself to certain teachers, to certain subjects, as it were. But how might somebody, if I was a French teacher, a Spanish teacher or something, and I'm watching and I'm saying, oh, yeah, no, this is wonderful, I see that, but how would that couple with service? And in my own mind, just to answer it in my novice mind, it's like the kids of different ages working together and having their abilities, and teachers then co-teaching together to put together programs that they bring their specialties to it. I don't know if I answered the question.
I think you people often answer on their own questions, so I'm glad you did that. One of the experiences that I do in schools, I'd say pretty much every time, whether in person or virtually, is I ask people to take a central theme, let's say like hunger, and see how all the different academic topics can fit into that. How do students are learning, for example, a language, especially a language that's not in that culture. Let's say if they're in Japan studying Spanish, they can learn about what are issues of hunger in other countries, and how do they even frame, even the terms we use. What term do they use to call a person, let's say, who's homeless? Because that will tell you a lot about how they value or what they think about other people. So we can take all of these different subjects and bring it together, and very often create what we call interdisciplinary learning experiences, where you find students, teachers in different subject areas, finding ways that they can blend how they teach. I know in South Africa at one point, there were students in a math class who were learning about statistics, and they did a review of statistics about issues regarding children and safe children and being safe and the rights of children around the world. And then they fed those statistics to an 8th grade social studies class so the students could go further in their learning. So these teachers had collaborated and found ways that they can partner and really bring learning to life in ways. And we know that in terms of brain research, that our brains, it's not so much left brain and right brain, it's how we're looking for connections in our brain. So when we connect math and science and we connect social studies and English, our kids just go like, the synapses go crazy, and kids are very happy about their learning, and memory and retention is higher. And I found teachers, again, love to collaborate with each other. And this can happen at any grade level. And I love that the elementary's collaborating with the high school. And what's happening there is the high school kids, I think, are also learning from the elementary school students. And that's really great. I hope I answered that well enough for you. Better than I did. Yes, absolutely. So please let me hand it over to you guys.
I would love to invite Claire first to introduce yourself to our community, but I would also, I'd invite you to share a little bit about your work at UWC, and if you have any interesting examples or anything of work that you've been part of, I think that would be really enjoyed by our community.
Hello, konnichiwa, everyone. I'm so delighted to be here and so honored to be here with you, Cathy, listening to you. It's just fantastic. So many, I'm just nodding all the way through everything you're saying, because your 5 stages of service learning is one of the major tools that we draw upon to build the Changemaker toolkit in our students. And I agree with so much of what you're saying, and I've seen it here. What a privilege, our jobs, to work with so many thousands of young advocates and change makers and really just see them grow in themselves. One of my favorite moments in a student is when they can identify their passions and their skills, connect with other like-minded students of whatever grade across the school, and then say, can we do something? Is somebody already doing this? Who is already doing this? And that kind of inquiry, curious collaboration, not the lone hero, like you said, the deficit model of I'm going to fix this. Well, you're not. You're 8. You're going to network up with a network of other change makers, and you're going to find out together with humility and reciprocity how together you can make bigger change. So it's fantastic that we are so privileged to work in this field. So excited to come and meet you all and learn from you and with you in Tokyo. I was thinking about an interdisciplinary example that I'd like to give as a high school example, actually, but it does go across the grades, because we really are proud of our service learning when we can say, here's our service learning family within the college and beyond the college. And this example is our Right for Rights. It's an annual event, but of course, as Cathy alluded to, the actual event is really the end of months and months, if not years, of investigation and preparation and collaboration. And it originated from a group of teachers saying, we would like a real audience for the writing. We're really interested in human rights, was one teacher. This is Global Perspectives class. We had the English teachers saying, we're learning this particular style of writing. We had the MUN teachers saying, how can we give different voice? So it became a group of teachers saying, let's work together and see what we can do together. And we've been running this now for many years, 12, 13 years, and it draws from the very smallest children who are just starting to write their names, right up to our grade 12s, and also beyond to our local school partners. So it's a really exciting collaboration. It didn't start like that. It's grown in its maturity and its complexity, but essentially we choose some issues that are going on in our region and globally, within Singapore and globally, some human rights, and we write to governments asking for change. And so you'll see it looks beautifully scruffy. Service learning done right usually doesn't look really polished. It looks really like a collection of student designed boxes with bits hanging off them and cardboard signs, kind of a wonky. If it looks really polished, then I always go, that looks like a teacher did that. That doesn't look like the students really owned that. And I have to say, as a perfectionist, that's quite hard to let go of, because we do like it to really look showy, but it's got to be from the kids. So you have to step back and facilitate the kids as they learn forward on how they're doing this. Obviously, by 12th grade, like you showed, Cathy, the infographics are beautiful, but there's a stage to get there. So we collect probably something between 10 and 12,000 letters from students of all ages, from parents too, from teachers, and we host a 24-hour writing experience for the older students. So we supervise them obviously in the classrooms, and some of them choose to stay. with sleeping bags and food and just write and write and write. And the K2s write their notes, bring it up, post it. It's fantastic experience. So you can get a real depth of learning, academic rigor, and a collaboration through service learning. So that's just one example. Anyway, I will be with you soon and we can talk so many more, innovate and create and build upon the fantastic work you're already doing there. That's so important, I think, to learn from you, meet you, make friends with you and find out what you're doing and how we can leverage. But Clive, I made a little video. I always say, if you can shoulder tap your community and kind of stick your phone in their face and say go without prompting, then you've really got a great authentic service program. So I held myself to account yesterday, ran around and spoke to lots of people, parents, kids, TAs, teachers. Anyway, here's what they would like to say to you.
Whenever you're ready, you can tell me your opinion.
Wait, 1 second.
So why is service learning so impactful and why do I love it so much?
I think that service learning to me is to help others and to give yourself a very meaningful purpose. An educational approach to teaching our community on how to make an impactful change.
Working with other people to make a difference.
Empathy.
And being kind.
I don't have any toilet or seat or food.
Service learning has been pivotal to my children here.
Helps me learn more about myself so I can do more for the planet.
僕にとってサービスは他の人を助けることによって世界のことを習うチャンスだと思ってます。
Gratitude.
To give our big friends.
They are now more empathetic.
And because we can feel happy.
No, I just don't want to smile. Like I keep smiling.
You can smile.
Look from different perspectives.
Learn about global issues that is happening around the world.
Just to be a part of something bigger than all of us.
Okay, I've got you. Go for it.
My opinion
Is learning about the change that other people around the world are doing and getting inspired to do it yourself.
How to be change makers.
It's an opportunity to learn new skills like systems thinking and embrace complexity.
Intentional.
It's meaningful engagement with diverse communities.
The satisfaction of giving away and compassion as really sets the baseline for all my other work.
Service.
I think we help.
To make a difference.
Knowing my community.
We are trying to help them to get the food and eat it and get more strength.
To me, the service learning program helps us to make links to the real world and help us make the right decision when we grow older and are making decisions on the global scale.
How does it make you feel?
A united sense of purpose.
Happy and grateful. You have an idea on how you can make a change and you can see your ideas become real life. Okay. 3, 2.
Wait, no, retake.
Better human care and planet care.
The awareness that even a small change can have huge impact.
One of the examples are paper recycling. Is showing gratitude to everything and helping people have a voice.
To make the world a better place.
It's a really fun way to meet new people.
Reaching out and doing what I can with my gifts and my talents.
Helping someone socially or environmentally.
僕は奉仕活動を通していろんな人に会ってで僕は今虎の保護活動を行っています。でローカルの人ともコミュニケーションを取ったりしてコミュニケーションを広げてます。
A sustainable future for all of us.
Because it makes you feel happy. That whenever you compost, it saves the world.
They're able to be systems thinkers.
サービスは違う国の人たちを助けるためにやるフレッシュブルットフライデーということをやってて、それは例えば果物とかをお金がなくて買えなかった人たちにそれを送るサービス。
It is about teaching humanity how we can take care of the planet. It makes me feel like they're having enough food to eat, grateful for them and happy for them.
What skills are you learning?
From this experience, it has taught me about the 3 R's and also that wasting is a issue around the world.
It really has changed their outlook on the world and how they can make a difference.
Doing service for others, as Mahatma Gandhi said, the only way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others.
I love service learning and I think it's so impactful.
Means that I can stand up for and take action for the causes that I believe in.
Aren't they amazing people? That's just the power of service learning. And I know as a parent and an educator, that's what I want to see in my children and our students. And I'm so excited to come and work with your students.
Hey, if I could ask a question, either I think for Claire or for Cathy, one of the things that I find a really compelling opportunity about adding a service learning program is I look at it as an opportunity for ASIJ to be true to our values around equity and inclusion. So, you know, schools like UWC or schools like ASIJ, you know, we tend to reward students who learn in a certain way. And many of our students excel with a certain type of processing of information in classes and so on. I wonder what both of you have seen about what can service learning really do for a school in terms of a genuine commitment to equity and giving all students, regardless of their neurodiversity, an opportunity really to shine and to excel?
That's a great question. And I think one that many schools are asking just in general, how can we create a more equitable learning environment in all these ways? For me, service learning has long been a successful way to do what often in education is called differentiation, where we make sure every student has a way into that learning experience. Some of it is one of the foundations of service learning, and Claire referenced it also in her remarks, and I said it a few times in my opening, is that knowing students' interests, skills, and talents is critical in learning, and to find out what will pull them in to that learning experience. And right there, that's a big difference, because I know for a fact that some schools and some teachers could go a whole year and not have ever asked that question: what interests you? What matters to you? And so we start there. That's one big difference. Also, some of the methods that I've written about and have brought to many schools, like I mentioned, that MISO method, that so students can find different ways even to do research. You know, you can't learn everything by Googling it. In fact, you only learn a very limited amount. So when we diversify how we're acquiring information, students who love to talk or love to observe all the different styles of learning has a better opportunity to bubble up to the surface, and we can use those. Also, when students really learn to value each other in the room, they then lean and learn from each other in a more consistent way. You know, very often in a group project, I know you've seen this, we all have, it's just a student who's like an outsider, who doesn't get brought in. It's kind of, you know, they're just an outsider. But if we begin every group process of doing a task together with, okay, let's check in, what are the interests, skills, and talents in the group, then every person is brought in always. And that's what I'm looking for when I influence schools with best teaching practices, because service learning is actually built on best teaching practices. You can't just say, okay, go do something. You have to build it on these everyday ways that we respect, engage, and involve young people. And so that's the process that I've outlined and that I've done and that I bring to schools. I think that's really critical.
Yeah, if I can build on that, coaching students and talking to students, some can find the identity of themselves and their purpose and the connection from the hinge question, what are you passionate about? Some students at that point might clam up and say, I'm not sure what my passion is yet, which is why the UN SDGs is a really lovely baseline for everybody, because you can say, well, here's 17 things that the world really cares about. Which is your favorite one? Or which is the one that you care about the most? And there we can find the hook for all students. So I think that's very, very inclusive. the colors, how simple it is, how bright it is, the feeling of a global community of change makers. Absolutely works with a 4-year-old, an 18-year-old, an alum, one of our NGO partners in Cambodia or Indonesia, the local school around the corner. Everybody has a favorite SDG. So that language of togetherness, it really does allow all students to feel that they're part of something meaningful. And we find certain teacher facilitators will facilitate their service learning differently. Some really successful groups will have their group of students together in the room or the field or the lab, wherever they're doing their service learning, the C, and they might have organized it along best practice and differentiation, like you said, Cathy. Okay, who wants to be on the advocacy group? Whose skill set is really fired up by taking a deep dive into that part of action? Who really is an entrepreneur and interested in business and really wants to work on the business side of things and the indirect service? Who wants to set up a marketing campaign, for example? All right, who are our researchers? We need you. If we're going to speak with and learn with other people, we better kind of know what we're talking about a bit first. So let's go out and find some research from the internet maybe, but better from the actual people. And who wants to actually dig in the soil? Who's going to push the wheelbarrow? Who's going to go to the food center? Who's going to go and build or farm? Who's going to do the direct service? So often you'll find that students will maybe try out all of them, or maybe they go, that's really me. But with a spiraled and intentional program, you're offering so many opportunities for kids to dip in and safely find out where they fit.
That's fantastic. Hey, I'm going to bring Ryosuke into the conversation and give him a chance to share a little. And then Scott, if you have a question you want to follow up with next, we'll do that. For everyone who's joining, you might remember we shared a document that we call Partnerships at ASIJ, and we'll share it again in the chat here shortly, because we envision Claire's work as our Director of Service Learning and Ryosuke's work as our Director of Strategic Partnership. And I realized we should have them on the call, also our Japan Center. So Mariko Yokosuko and Kyoko Takano, I wish they were here too. We see that group as playing a very interdependent and critical role in going further. And what I would share with everyone who's joining the call, I would say that Ryosuke, to some extent, your work over the last 2 years has probably been as much in the realm of service learning as in the realm of strategic partnerships. So I wonder if you would just take a moment and talk about how you see your role within strategic partnerships as evolving, and how you likely will work with Claire, going forward, as well as with Mariko and Kyoko.
Yeah, thank you so much. So again, I'm really excited to welcome Claire to our team next year. Then I think, ASIJ being the really, founded in 1902, we have a really rich history and tradition. With that, some exciting examples of whether it's about service or our commitment to our local communities and so on, right? But I think this is a time where we can be really intentional about how we can define, the American school in Japan. Then I think through our partnerships, I think this is some exciting things that we can do. So strategic partnerships, we have been doing it for past 2 years. And yeah, as Jim said, some service activities there, some leadership activities, and some student learning, in different domains. And the Japan Center has been here for, I believe, 7 years now. So I think the great things are already happening, but it's just like connecting different dots. And I think, as Jim said, it's really about interdependence. And I think then with that, in that document, partnerships, how we define partnerships, there are 3 different categories of domains. One is leadership, coming from strategic partnerships. How can we train global leaders from ASIJ, working with companies, organizations, individuals. Next one is culture. How can we embrace this Japanese context at this school? And Japan Center has been doing a great work around that. So partnerships around culture. Then the third piece that up to this time, Japan Center or I have been doing is really about service. Then I think, this is what we're really excited about welcoming Claire. So there's the partnerships around service. So we would target partnerships from the angle of leadership, culture, and service. Then I think these three things, our team working together, we really believe that we can actually make a huge difference in student lives and also to our community members. I feel like, with all these things really kind of like refocusing on learning and also the kind of refocusing on our commitment to Japan. I think that's very, very important.
Can I jump in there and just say, I'm so excited to work with you. Obviously, did I mention that already? Probably did. But I really, really think that your strategic approach here to really identify and map out your key areas of partnership and to have set the the kind of groundwork for us to really work together is absolutely fantastic. Very often in my work, I'm sort of retrofitting and trying to onboard and build relationships between somewhat siloed areas that have their own strategic plan, and they're really doing their best to work to their reportables, if you like. But I think ASIJ's approach is really, really sensible, and I'm very excited to be part of that together.
I quickly want to mention, even on, I believe on today's call, there are existing partners, who have been working with us. So there are great organizations or great individuals who really care about service and service learning and really helping others, in our local communities. So it's not really about, we are starting everything from scratch, right? We have really great examples. It's really about us coming together and working together. So I can't wait to really introduce Claire to some people on the call today as well later.
Ryosuke, would you go ahead and name some of the partners that are joining us today? I think that'd be wonderful for our community to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. So even you look at our high school service clubs, there are many high school clubs, and they often work with external organizations such as Hands on Tokyo, and also the Shine On or a Place to Grow. Or also we'll be working closely with International Christian University, which is a university right next to ASIJ, and they have a service learning center. And so those are some examples of great organizations that we have been working, and local organizations that they are already doing great things, and they are closely working with the high school students. So we are really excited about really elevating what we have been doing to the next level.
If I can jump in, I had a question. It's for Cathy and Claire, and I just want to say thank you so much for being here. I was getting re-excited just listening up front, and thanks to all our families who are here. And Cathy, when you were talking about being driven from student interest, that's a really different way to think about school than maybe the experience that a lot of us had going through school, where we think about curriculum as something that teachers lead and teachers know where everything is going to go. And so it's really a rethinking, it seems like, of curriculum and school. And I know one of the things that sometimes happens is maybe parent expectations, or also even amongst teacher expectations, that we have things look the same across the curriculum. And yet if we're really driven by student interest, that's not really going to play out in the same way maybe it has in the past. So I'm wondering if you could share a little on how maybe we might need to think differently about what even we mean by curriculum, and the implications of really having student interest drive where some of the learning or much of the learning goes.
Okay, that's another seminar, but we'll touch upon it today. Also, it's very interesting because I've long really I committed quite a bit of time to thinking about what this means about student interest because of these reasons. And I've really thought about why is interest a driver? Because interest builds curiosity, builds questioning, builds discovery, which leads to possibility. So we have this trajectory that happens when we really target and we really listen to what an interest is. And we all know, who've been around children, whether they're your own children or whether they're in a classroom, when we really find that children's interest comes to life, I mean, the light bulbs go off. They're there, they want to be there, and they want to learn everything about something. I remember in one school I was at, I went in to set up my classroom, and there was a spider's nest in the corner, and I do not like spiders. I'm going to be real clear. That is not my thing. But I thought of 2 boys that were going to be in my classroom. I went, oh my gosh, if I left it there, I know they would love it. So I did, against all my better judgment on some level. And they came in and they developed this extraordinary inquiry about these spiders. And these kids would have been a nightmare otherwise, I just know it. They learned everything, and they set up these learning stations for other people. And then they wrote these little books about spiders. And it was like, I was realizing I could take their interest and I could really funnel my curriculum, my intentions, and the key learning concepts I wanted them to have into that process. So I think obviously we do start out with, these are some of the thoughts, and because we're knowledgeable about learning, that's what we go to school for, that's what we build our path or career in. We can know the kinds of things we want students to learn, but we can be much more creative about how we get there. And we can much more, because also if we leave room for youth voice and youth direction, it will shift things. For my part, I'm sure Claire agrees with me, if there's not a surprise if a surprise has not happened to you during the service learning experience, it wasn't service learning, because something's going to shift it, change it, make it better, things you didn't think of. Someone's going to ask a question or have an opportunity. So that means that derails some of what we plan to do. And it can, if we're so focused on getting to this particular outcome, and I've seen some teachers do that, like, we're going to get there no matter what, that won't really allow for this kind of flexibility and creativity. So I think schools are moving away from this. I've got to get to this endpoint. And they're saying the endpoint is yet to be discovered, because we really honor the students and their learning process. So I think this is a beautiful time to be involved in education, because I think we're releasing some of these old pedagogies, and we're looking at some new opportunities and ways to frame what happens in this place we call school.
My students would really laugh if they could hear the 4 words I'm about to say, because I say them a lot. But I really, really do believe that everybody wants to thrive. They want to flourish, they want to have grit, and they want to be nimble. And those qualities to have yourself and to learn, so important in today's changing world. I mean, look what we've been through in the last 2 years and what's coming up. So I know that it's a way, service learning is a way for students to feel hopeful and to make a personal connection. Their interest, I always use the 5 whys, and it really annoys them, but why are you interested in that? Yeah, but why? Yeah, but why? Yeah, but why? Until they really do actually get down there to their mental models, if you like. There's so many tools that you can use, but the 5 whys is just a really annoying, great, simple one. And you'll get there. It's because I have this deep belief in something. It's because my culture, my grandparents taught me. And when you can really find the mental model that's driving that child, that's the deep learning that you can really leverage in any subject at any age. And that feeling that their personal drive, the reason for them being them, their identity, if you like, is connected to other people, and that they can investigate and take action with others around it. That's kind of magic learning.
Super. Let me bring in a question. So we do have questions come in on the Q&A function. Anybody who has a question, you want to add it to that, please go ahead and do that. But an interesting question from Caroline. Hi, Caroline. First of all, wonderful presentation, Cathy and Claire. How has the pandemic changed the landscape of the service learning in the world? Have you seen, for example, a revitalized passion and interest to dive deeper into service learning by schools and students that you're working with? And how might we utilize the impact from the pandemic to further expand our service learning?
It's a great question, and it's a definite reality. I mean, we all know that this made school change dramatically, and it brought a lot of things to a halt. And a lot of educators had to just focus on how to really make school work virtually. There was just so much up in the air. And service learning, for many people became, wait, all I'm trying to do is just get from one day to the next. And that was to be respected. And I have only admiration for all the teachers and administrators who stuck through this process and figured out how to make it work. But what also came to the surface in the forefront is that students really still wanted to have impact in the world. They didn't want to leave it behind, that they needed this probably more than ever. And a lot of the work I found going on all over the world, and I mean literally all over the world, students wanted to do things around well-being and our mental health, because they saw that there was so much of us that were stretched and strained by the pandemic. So there've been some amazing work that students have done to think about the well-being of other students, parents, and community members. And that became a focus for a lot of people in this field. And also they still kept some of those passions and interests that Claire was bringing up. I know students are still finding ways, especially now, to get back into the community and do things directly. They've also done a lot to do the learning that will get them ready to go back into personal action as soon as things lift a little bit. But I've still found students wanting to reach out, to connect with people, and to really think about the well-being of our community. Claire, I know you've seen quite a bit because you've been in one school during this time. I've been surveying many schools. So what have you seen with this?
Yeah, I echo that a lot around well-being and just such a heightened care for others, which is at the root of service learning. And sometimes when you're deeply in your service learning action or investigation stage, you're busy and you forgot the care part because there's a timeline of what you're trying to do. So it has allowed us to press pause a little bit. And I think definitely a building of empathy of what it was like for them and looking out the window, what could it be like for others? I know about marginalized communities in Singapore. I know about my NGO community in Thailand or Vietnam or whatever. I know about my local partnership round the corner. What's it like for them? I know a lot of our students have turned the mirror in on themselves and said, I can still access my education because I have my laptop. But what about my friends from Murney? They don't have laptops. How are they doing? Or what about my friends from the Down Syndrome Association? They used to come and swim with us every week. How are they staying fit? And those light bulbs were going off for our students. We had a lot of emails saying, I'm so concerned about my friends in, So it really showed us the strength of the partnerships. And because we've been partners, hello, new partners, can't wait to meet you. Because we've been partners for such a long time with people, just that relationship was really open and transparent. So we were able to speak to our partners and say, how are you doing? Some centers were saying, we really just need friendship. Is it okay if we Zoom in? So we'd reach out to the students at all levels, primary too, and say, hey, we've had a call in saying they'd love a yoga lesson. So you'd see kids in bubbles of 5 learning how to do a simple yoga move, 6-year-olds, and doing those yoga moves online with their elderly partners, and some groups pivoting to a call for rice. And it really, really was a varied and reciprocal call, but those connections stayed and maybe became more intimate because we were able to really dialogue with each other. Loneliness was a big feature. So we've been really been working on what it felt like to be disconnected and how we can use technology and personal connection. And a lot, as you said, Cathy, building forward. Okay, when we do this again, how are we going to do this better with the new learning that we've got? But friendships was a big piece. And a lot of growth in our school, which I'm super happy about, actually on the campus. So what was just the roundabout at the end of the driveway has now become Adventure Island for the infant school. And they've been down there recycling and repurposing what was waste, which of course now they realize it's not waste, that's a learning resource. And they've designed this amazing playground in the roundabout. So all sorts of little things like that going on the campus. And the students have been investigating eco-anxiety and the benefits of connection with nature and new value of soil. And now we have an entire grade level, that's 10 classes, with worm farms in their classrooms because they want to look after their worms and they understand the smaller pieces and how they connect. So it's been really tough. but there's been some absolutely great connections.
And I think right now there's a real resurgence, because not that we know what's happening next with this pandemic or endemic, but there's a real desire to build this again and to make sure that we're not losing and leaving this critical part of our school experience behind. So it's really, really on everyone's mind. It's a constant conversation.
So guys, Diane has what is a perennial question at international schools. You know, we have a lot of international students where the local language is not their mother tongue. So what are the ways that students can make a local impact while navigating these sometimes significant language and cultural barriers?
You know, I do love that question. So I'm going to jump in if you don't mind here. So what I've discovered is that many of the students at international schools will live international lives of some kinds. It's not uncommon for them to have all kinds of, to be in many parts of the world where there'll be many different cultures to learn and many different languages to interact with. So for me, it's not a barrier at all. This is a perfect opportunity and laboratory to explore how do we make this work. And the best people to ask are the students who are going to be involved. All right, we want to do this. What's the best way for us to make sure we're learning about what the cultural background is? And what's the best way to make sure that we're being respectful and that we're communicating effectively? And so I think when students start unpacking that question and start thinking about it, then they'll come up with some very creative, innovative answers. But when people take that approach, it's not a barrier. It's like, this is rich with learning. And this is where we need to really lift it up and say, okay, how are we going to do it? How are we going to do this one? And of course, you've got other students who can translate. There's so much you can do, but I think it's the students who we frame that question to and see what their ideas are, because that's part of the problem solving. What I found with service learning is most of the questions we have, we want to ask them. We want them to solve it. We want them to think it through. And the more we learn how to do that as a daily practice in school as educators, the more we'll get to that transformation that was brought about earlier, Scott. How do we really transform a school to have youth voice and youth choice as amplified as it needs to be?
Yeah, I'll just add the idea of a network of change makers is really important. So what might be, I agree with you completely, Cathy, it's not a barrier. It's a really exciting opportunity to build intercultural competence, to build connection with place, to identify, make friends with your local community. I mean, I could go on, but there's so much fantastic personal and academic learning and skills that can come from this. But to say to yourself, the student group, this might be a barrier, might be a challenge. How are we going to work around this? To systems map, to identify leverage, to ask who already did this. Is there a failure report on this? Yes, there is. There was a group that tried to do this and it didn't work. Let's read their failure report. And a key one, let's reach out to our local community, any social entrepreneurs out there doing this. What about the parents? Have they got any connections? So you can see already that kind of mindset, if you can, which I'm sure, and I've seen in everything that I've interacted and read from your school, you have that growth mindset. So hold on to that, and it's not a barrier.
One other thing I want to add is one school, at my request, they let me do a workshop on service learning for all the local staff. So there were representatives from the bus drivers, from the groundskeepers, from the every part of the school. So everyone knew about what service learning was, cafeteria people, and they often were able to assist with all these different kinds of nuance, whether it was language or who knows someone over here, or can somebody tell me the history of that? So it actually brought the whole entire school community together. And I think that's an exquisite way to also move.
I want to jump in a little bit there. Sorry. I think Cathy and Claire mentioned about relationships, right? I mean, that's very, very important. We need to really build these sustained, relationships with local communities. And also it's important that we define community, right? There's ASIJ community. Most of our students live kind of far from our school, right? So the immediate local community could be where they live. School also has neighboring communities, Chofu, Fuchu, Mitaka. So I think by defining all those places, and each community has a unique character and unique people and unique needs. So I think for us to be really genuine a community member, and that's very, very important. So they know it's not just about us coming out like when 3/11 earthquake happens or when the pandemic hits, but it's on a regular day, on a normal days, like we are really community member, right? Then how we contributing to our local communities and local people, and how we working together, how we living together, or how we creating a better future. I think that's quite important. Then some of those things are not anything fancy, right? Then flashy. It's really about us living together, right? Then, but I think that's very, very important.
Beautifully said.
I totally agree. I think mapping your communities of care as an individual, just taking the time, it's not rocket science, but here's me as a student, where are my communities of care? Oh, my condo. Yeah, I need to be a great involved active citizen in my condo or at the train station. I'm not just that service kid in that service group. My communities of care go way beyond that. And therefore my opportunities to be a ripple are kind of everywhere. And students absolutely love seeing how important they are to all those multiple communities.
Excellent. I have questions that would take a lot longer than the few minutes we have left. Jim, I don't know if you want to say a few remarks.
Sure. I would just like to share my thanks to Cathy and to Claire for joining us, also to Ryosuke and Scott and Clive for moderating. Thank you very much. And for everyone who joined. I hope that you leave this particular webinar kind of excited about ASIJ's future. To me, as I listened to Cathy and Claire in particular, I think the words that I heard most often were the word experience and the word transformative or transformation. So if I were to try as distilled as possible to say, what my hope is for ASIJ's future, it really is around creating transformative experiences by design over time, understanding that every experience doesn't hit the same kid in the same way. But if we're purposeful, if we're methodical, if over time we design the kind of experiences that allow our children to see themselves as leaders, as difference makers, as people who can actually be part of change, I think we do something incredibly powerful. And we embrace all the values that we talk about all the time, whether around inclusion or equity or agency or all the things that we aspire to do. If I were to really bring it down, I would share with everyone, Scott and I sometimes talk about who's on your Mount Rushmore. So who are the people who have truly inspired you in life in terms of thinkers or academics and so on. And on my Mount Rushmore is a brilliant Brazilian philosopher named Paulo Freire. And Freire was really significant in the second half of the 20th century, really around pedagogy and thinking differently about how you actually teach. And his particular innovation or phrase that I think he's always connected to is engage the world, change the world. So really to engage in the world around you and to see yourself as a change maker who can actually make a significant difference, not just in the global community, but actually in your local community in terms of how you learn and how you come to understand yourself within the context or the communities that you live. So that's always been a particularly impactful idea to me, and one that really kind of captures a lot of my aspirations as we lean into this partnerships work. So again, thank you so much for joining us. Clive, back to you. I don't know if you want to finish up.
Yep. I'm really excited to add this to our library of ASIJ 2030 sessions. It's the third one we've done this year. We actually started with well, what do our kids need to thrive in uncertain times with Homa Tavanger and Will Richardson. And again, these are all recorded so people can go back and watch them. We also had Jeff Salingo talking about who gets into college and why. Always a point of angst for parents, as I'm aware of. And now we've added this one. We do have one more coming up a little bit later in the year, and it is an all alumni panel of specialists in the HR industry. And these alumni graduated as far back as '76. And we have HR and talent specialists from Coca-Cola, Facebook, Morgan Stanley, TD, Barclays, a little bit finance heavy there, but still, I'm sure they'll be able to share a lot of information. So I'm just really excited that we've been able to add these and share these with parents and alumni and the entire community. Thank you, Cathy.
Very well.
Really excited for you to join us because, again, I have a lot of questions right here that need answered. All right, and thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you again very soon. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Appreciate it.
Bye.